Good afternoon, my name is Christopher Samuel Numrinen, and I will be demonstrating how to use the socialNet tool implemented and developed for the MSc dissertation. So the executables and the source code as well as the test data for this demonstration are all stored in this folder called Final Project. In the Final Project folder, we have executable folder which contains the main.exe file used to launch the socialNet tool application. We have the source.net solutions folder which contains the source code of the project. And we have the test data folder which contains the data we'll be using for this demonstration. Before launching the main program, it is important to give a brief description of the data we'll be using for this demonstration. Please note that the zip folder sent to you only contains the test data using instant messaging service. This is due to the fact that the folder containing the emails were too large to be sent over an internet connection. So, in the test data folder, we have two folders, each folder pertaining to different online interactions. In this case, we have the Gmail history folder, which contains all the emails downloaded from using the Gmail service using Windows Live Mail. And we have the Live Messenger history folder, which contains the history conversations using Microsoft Live Messenger instant messaging service. In the Live Messenger history folder, we have 88 history conversations. Each file contains conversations held with that particular individual. So I'm going to open up one particular file. This one, Alex Riolo. As you can see, this file contains a number of conversations stored in XML format, and each conversation contains a number of messages. A conversation is finished or closed when the user closes the window. That is, the session has been terminated. In the Gmail history folder, we have a number of emails. In this case, around 700 email messages. The difference to the way history conversations are stored using instant messaging service Microsoft Live Messenger is that each file contains a number of conversations. In this case, each file here represents a different message. Therefore, it was important to develop some kind of algorithm that will be able to group these messages into a conversation and group these conversations into a relationship. So this is the test data that we will be using for this demonstration. We will now launch the main application. This is the user interface of socialNet. Over here, number of persons refers to the number of individuals from which we're going to extract a social network and perform some kind of social analysis. It is very common that when using different online interactions, some individuals tend to use different email addresses. In order for the system to determine that two different email addresses represent the same individual, the individual is asked to enter the email addresses they used when using the online interactions. Over here, the user is prompted to enter their instant messaging display names when taking part in a particular conversation. This is due to the way Microsoft Live Messenger stores their history conversations. When extracting the data from the particular history file, it was impossible to distinguish between the sender and the receiver, as the individual in the history conversation was represented by the display name and not by their unique email address. For example, if I had to go back to the test data and open up particular history conversation of a particular individual, you will notice that the names in these conversations change depending on the display name. So for example, we have Alex and Chris. And if we go further down, Chris has now changed his display name to this. Therefore, it was impossible to determine whether Chris was associated with this display name or whether Alex was associated with this display name. This might at first seem a bit cumbersome, however, it was necessary. So, we're going to now demonstrate how to use socialNet. Number of persons, so we're going to enter one individual, and we're going to be using the test data as I already previously demonstrated beforehand. Click OK. Now we're going to specify the directories where the conversation history is kept. So we'll click on the individual. We're going to open up the directory where emails are stored. So we'll go to Final Project here, Test Data, Gmail History. We're going to open up the directory where instant messaging history is stored. Okay. I'm going to click Analyze. Once the analysis is complete, the user's individual is marked with a tick. Now I'm going to explain the information extracted from using these online interactions and how it is presented. So in the Social Data tab, we have a number of what we call base metrics, which are used to help determine the strength of the relationship with an individual. For example, if we click on number of conversations, we have a graph view where each bar represents a relationship. And as you can see, these relationships are represented by a unique email address. And in brackets, we have the score value calculated for that particular relationship. Here we have the conversation size, which is the size of each conversation within a relationship. We have the number of conversations, which is the total number of conversations in a relationship. The duration of a conversation, so how long does a conversation particularly last. We have the number of messages over time. In this case, it's over a month. Number of messages per conversation, so how many messages are there in each conversation. The response time, so it's the total response time of each individual in that particular relationship. And we have my response time. So whereas in the response time metric we're calculating the average response time of myself and that particular individual, in this case we're just calculating the response time of myself. The graph is very similar obviously to the response time. So the metric values or score values are calculated by first determining the value of that relationship particular to that metric. So let's take for example the conversation size. So first, the average size of each conversation held within a particular relationship is calculated. This is done for all the relationships in the social network of that individual. once we have these results, then the current value of that particular individual is subtracted from the maximum conversation size in that social network. And this value is divided by the minimum conversation size minus the maximum conversation size. And this is the score value given to that particular relationship. This is the same for each metric, except for in the case of response time, where the lower the value, the better the relationship. The formula slightly changes. Now we'll move on to the social information, which is basically a combination of the base metrics. This is due to the fact that looking at these base metrics independently does not give you an accurate idea of the strength of the relationship in the social network. However, by combining these metrics, we are able to give a clearer picture of that particular relationship. So we have in this tab My Relations, where I'm going to click on Show Network. And as you can see, we have the social network of the particular individual. In this case, it's myself because we're using my data. So, if I hover over each individual here, you should display the email address, and if they entered any information about themselves using Microsoft Live Messenger, also other information should be displayed. Let's see if we can find. So here, as you can see, the display name is Bonici Bonnie, and email address is Matthew Bonici. And as you notice, that not everyone enters all the information about themselves using Microsoft Live Messenger. So as you can see, we have relationship links between individuals and between the individuals and myself. If you hover over the lines, you can see the score value calculated for that particular individual. And this value represents the score value calculated by using those derived metrics. We are also able to suggest friends in the social network by ticking the checkbox Suggest Friends and clicking on Show Network. By hovering over a particular individual, you'll notice that certain icons are enlarged. These represent the suggested friends to that individual. These are calculated by getting the top scores from derived metrics of that particular individual's relationships in the social network. To conclude, we have extracted social networks from an individual's online interactions, in this case email and instant messaging. We have calculated scores using the base metrics that help determine the strength of the relationship in the social network of a number of individuals. We have also combined these base metrics and assigned them particular weightings in order to give a picture of the relationship strength of an individual in the social network. Using these calculations, we're able to suggest friends to particular individuals in the social network.